This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Alex Natskovich on the show, and he is the CEO of MEV, or MEV, as some people call it. And we're going to talk about software development and the merging of teams in-house and outsourced. We're talking about culture and lots of other things. Anyway, with all that being said, Alex, welcome to the show.
Hi, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you got into software engineering and what is it that you do?
Sure. I mean, for me, the software engineer started very early on. I'm one of those, I'm pretty old now, but I used to be one of those kids who just geeked out and put, took computers apart and wrote different programs. Back in the day, it was C, an assembly language, and then kind of progressed towards more high-level languages. And so used to be an engineer and write code. Now I mostly write emails and run a company called MEV. Been doing that for almost 20 years now. Yeah, and so we're basically a technology services provider. We build complex software solutions, primarily for software product companies, but every now and then we work with non-software product companies. Mm-hmm. And essentially, we're building technology solutions for folks.
So one thing I want to just jump right in at that I saw on your website when I was looking through it on your careers and sections page, you talk a lot about some of the things that I'm passionate about, which is what motivates us as people. And Dan Pink had a book, Drive, in there. He talked about, purpose, autonomy, and mastery as being things that really motivate people. And right there on your website, you have stuff about why us, mastery, autonomy, value, making a win-win. And these buzzwords and key terms that just sucked me in of curious about how that's important to you in building your team.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it wasn't like that all the time when we were just starting out. I was basically, okay, let's just do it boom, 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 building technology. I didn't really pay much attention to the people component of building a business, which obviously is a huge mistake. And, so really that model, we call it Motivation 3.0, it helped us to crystallize the way to really build teams that are very highly self-motivated. They can have the culture of ownership and really don't show up there just to sort of show up and do the job, but really show up there to achieve an outcome, right? To help clients to get what they want and really deliver our mission, which is helping businesses win with the right technology, right? So this is what we're there to do every day. And through that, really empowering this business ecosystem. I'm very big proponent of helping businesses and really kind of businesses being the general good for society. So that's our contribution to it, helping businesses win with the right technology. So to really accomplish that, this model that Daniel Pink put together, I found it really helpful in a way that crystallizes both the way you manage individuals, right? So those are the three components. You really can give them to kind of increase motivation and really help them become the better versions of themselves. And this is what we're trying to do. But also manage teams as a whole. And this is where, we kind of experimented quite a bit with merging Motivation 3.0, autonomous purpose model with agile software development practices. And really, if you look at the two very closely, and if you look at Agile Manifesto, there is a lot of overlap. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason there is because, Agile Manifesto is put together by humans. Motivation 3.0 is for humans, right? So it's all driven by human nature, and I think it all emerges from human nature. And this is what we found being quite practical, and not just theoretical, right? Very practical in terms of helping individuals and teams improve, get better, right? And deliver better outcomes for the clients. So this is how we kind of came about and really started integrating all of that into every aspect of what we do, from hiring, as you saw in our careers section, to the service delivery that we do with our clients, even in sales. I talk about that a lot when meet clients because it's very important. Those are the components that we seek in every engagement. And this is typically very unusual. When you talk to a client, they were like, well, why do I need to tell me why I'm building this product, right? Like all those things, they atypical for a vendor to ask for, right? And so really explaining the reason behind even that and what it helps us to do, it helps us to serve them better, right? I think it kind of aligns everybody and creates a better understanding across the board for everyone.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When you look at Agile and just in the basics of writing a user story, you have that last clause of so that, which kind of answers that why question. And, going in and understanding the why behind things, I think is so valuable. There's been so many times where I can look back on a project I was working on probably 10 years ago, and the people said, oh, we want to do this. We want to do this one thing here. And then the more you talk about it, you figure out, well, why do you want to do that? Well, what's the benefit of that? You find out that there's a much better solution somewhere else. It's even easier, cheaper, and will outperform what they were asking for. They just didn't know that was even a possibility.
Yeah, for sure. I have exactly the same experience. Very often, the deeper you understand the why, you may adjust kind of like the solution itself too, but quite often it also helps you, even if the solution stays the same, right? It helps you as an engineer to write better code because you understand the whole set of constraints that exist, right? You understand, like if you make this type of decision versus that type of decision, it's going to influence the outcome in a way that is more optimal for that specific target, for the specific goal, for the specific problem you solve, right? So the deeper you understand the context, I think, the better engineer you become essentially. And this is what I try to really, to kind of drive with our teams to understanding really like what problem are we solving exactly here, right? Maybe there's no better way, but can we solve it better, right? Can we do?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I always think about is when it comes to like being a business partner, as an engineer. Engineers really, I found that it helped me when I was writing code to understand the business and having that business aspect and having a little bit of knowledge about how we make revenue, how we make money, what's the value of doing this, and how do you do that as, a consultant or being someone that's, not, when you're working as a vendor for somebody, how do you find out at least outcomes that you guys are working for different products?
It's it's a good question. I think first of
it was a long question too. So
it's really, no, it is, but it's good. I think it originates from the values, right? So it really kind of having the right values and really having everybody kind of, following those values, if you will, right? Exhibit the values. And so the culture itself becomes really the driver. But fundamentally, at the tactical level, it comes to kind of like deeply caring about what you do, right? About your craft, about helping clients, really caring about win-win, right? In the true sense of word, like it's a very overused term, but really if you're building a win-win with people you're working with, that'll force you to kind of ask uncomfortable questions and seek deeper understanding, right? And sort of drill down into the why and understand bigger picture and everything. And so at the tactical level, again, it kind of comes to just being not afraid, being curious, A, and B, not being afraid to ask difficult questions to clients. And sometimes, they may not be comfortable answering them, and that's fine, but really trying to understand them better. And what I found, if you come from that position of, I'm not really trying to take advantage of you, but I'm trying to understand better your business so we can serve you better, right? And then you show that through communication, through your actions, people will open up, right? And they share the contact better with you. They would start seeing you not really as a vendor or consultant, they start seeing you as a partner. As somebody they can come to with different sorts of problems, not just maybe the one that you're solving for them, but all sorts of issues. And because they know, like, you're going to put your brain to solving it, and maybe you're not going to be able to solve it, but you're going to at least try. And if you're not able to, you'll tell them, straight up. So those are things that I found really help to start establishing this deeper trust, deeper understanding. And that kind of feeds on itself, right? It kind of helps you to really start delivering more optimal results. And that in itself, in its own right, kind of shows that, you can be trusted, right? So people start trusting you more. And it's kind of this virtuous cycle, right? You get in deeper understanding, providing better results, getting deeper understanding, and so on and so forth. So that's, I think, one of the ways that we were able to do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you kind of hit on right there that was, I think it's really important, and some people kind of miss out on, is the fact that you had to deliver good results to get that next step.
Oh yeah,
people will trust you so much, until you give them like good results, and then they'll trust you a little bit more and a little bit more, and it's kind of like a give and take that you have to kind of build that trust relationship as you go through. While you're doing that, how important is transparency in these type of projects that you're working with? Like, I've worked for, with some, companies where we've outsourced engineering to, and they were almost like you were tossing requirements into a black box, and they had no transparency about who you're working with. And I've worked with others where it's very transparent. And, obviously I like one of those better than the other, but what is your take on some of that and the importance of transparency?
Oh, I'm a huge proponent to like maximum transparency. The most amount you can actually, sustain, like the bad, right? And it depends a little bit on the situation, because on the other side, you don't want to overwhelm people. If I'm working with you and you like a very busy individual, and I'm asking you to join daily meetings and join, midday meetings about something and join this and join that, like we can fill up your schedule with meetings that are important, right? And it'll give you maximum transparency, but it'll also take a lot of your time. So I think it's a matter of like finding that balance. Yeah, really engaging you in a way that is practical to achieving the outcome, right? It also helps you understand what's going on very well. And so that may mean, you look at every pull request. Maybe that's the case in your situation, right? Or it may mean you only join demos once, at the end of the sprint. And that's it, right? Or maybe it's something in between. But I'm a big proponent of really bringing sort of a product owners and technical leadership as close, and ideally even customers, as close with the people who are doing the job, right? Whether it's designers, developers, whoever, and helping build that kind of a team cohesion, help build the shared context, right? And help everybody understand each other a little bit more. It starts to create empathy on both sides. And my experience, it leads to better outcomes. It is a harder road to travel because it's a lot easier just to throw work over the fence, right? And maybe you get something back. So it's like, but it's a lot harder to really kind of like, understand people who's actually doing the work and then understand you. And then you have to think more and kind of adjust certain things, right? But it leads, in my opinion, to better and more effective outcomes. It might take a little bit longer at the beginning to start seeing those results, but, down the road, it really pays tremendously in terms of what you can build and what results you can achieve.
Yeah, and I think that empathy word is a hard one. Sometimes it's really hard to develop empathy, especially like I know it's been a growing trend for ever since I've been in software engineering, probably before that, where teams that are all onshore will hire outsourced augmentation to augment their staff so they can get more work done at a short period of time, and then maybe they'll scale that back and scale it up and scale it back depending on projects. And sometimes they stay there all the time. They just have like a certain percentage that's always going to be outsourced. How do you get those teams to work well together? And what's a good mix of that? Is it just having offshore teams work on certain projects? Is it blending the two together? And what's the best methodology that you've seen?
Yeah, so that's a good kind of dichotomy. The way I kind of look at it, really, maybe first step is really picking the right model, right? So whether it's in what I call the aligned autonomy, where essentially the offshore team, or doesn't necessarily need to be offshore, but like the team that is outside of your core organization, right? They have a certain degree of autonomy, but it's aligned with your goals, right? And then the other model is really what I call kind of like a full integration, where it's, you have a bunch of people, they all over the place, they part of your team or part of your teams, and they more, integrated very deeply into your software development life cycle. So those are models that I've seen. Most of them I think have place. But in my opinion, kind of a prerequisite to either of them working is really the right cultural compatibility. Because if you don't have that, and if your organization, maybe it's focused on super high quality, right? And you need everything to be working flawlessly, right? And you invest a lot in like built-in quality. You invest a lot in, DevOps, CI/CD kind of integration. And you hire vendors like don't believe in those things, and they do it sort of like because you tell them to. It's not going to create good results, no matter how you organize the teams, right? Maybe it's like communication culture. So I think paying attention to culture is important as like a first foundational element of really creating an effective, blended model, if you will. Second thing is more of a constraint, and this is ability to have face-to-face meetings with them, right? What we used to do, and still do to less of a degree, especially after COVID, we used to bring people to US. We used to have clients go to visit, teams in Ukraine and Europe, and just kind of create, and even spend a lot of time with them, like months, 2 months, 3 months. Just it's create a very different level of empathy and very different level of kind of team cohesion. So if that's a possibility, I think that allows sort of more flexibilities in terms of what model you can pick, right? If that's not a possibility, I think aligned autonomy may be a better model, because you don't necessarily need to integrate everybody into your organization and have everybody kind of being part of your daily process. So in aligned autonomy, in my parlance, if you will, this is where essentially you define the objective for the team, you define kind of the constraints, you have checks and balances, and you let them do their job, right? Basically, you'll tell them, okay, I want to build this module. It needs to work this way. This is our architectural vision. You guys go and do it, right? You're still involved, like there's all the regular process and things like that, but they own it. And actually the culture of ownership is one of other prerequisites for that model. Like if they have that culture, and if they're able to really truly own the execution, the delivery, right, the outcome, then that model will work, right? And not everybody can, and you need to sort of look at like what the process they would use to make sure, and what people they have on the team. But if those prerequisites are met, that tend to be very effective model, and that could be, especially if you have larger organization, you have team of teams, that could be kind of like a good model to start creating maybe some of the offshore teams, maybe kind of slightly lower labor costs. So maybe, if you want to do the follow the sun type of development cycle, for whatever, business reason, that's a pretty good model to follow. And I found it being effective in this case. If there is a possibility to sort of create a better team cohesion, that's certainly fully integrated and also be really, really great, especially for, a long running product cycles, right? So we're not really hiring somebody for, a few months, maybe a year to build something, kind of deploy it and off board, where you're really trying to expand your team's capabilities. And maybe you increasing the velocity, maybe you sort of, maybe you need to cover some functional gaps, right, in your SDLC process. So in this case, I think being able to having cultural compatibility critical, right? Being able to meet with those folks face to face, bring them to your team, have them spend a few weeks, a month, whatever it takes, right? With the team, understand how the company works, understand what the culture is, what people are talking about, who they are, right? Is very critical, and helps you to start kind of building this team cohesion, culture of collaboration. And then from there on, it's really kind of like just proactive management, especially of this aspect of us versus them, me versus the rest of the organization, right? Like you need to be, in addition to all the normal things like we talked about, autonomy as your purpose, that's like another little component that you just need to be very cognizant about and sort of nip it in about every time you see it starting to pop up, right? Because, people just by the nature of being removed from the team, from the core team, different times on different cultures, they start to sort of drift away. So you need to sort of bring them back periodically, right? It's like an entropy. You sort of need to fight it a little bit. And so that's the way I've seen kind of fully integrated model works pretty well too. Frankly speaking, we have clients who use both. And in both cases, I found that if you pick the right model and you really sort of invest in it, it could be very successful.
And when you're doing that fully integrated model, how important is it to align the cultures of the team and the culture of the company that you're working with?
I think this is probably more important than in the case of aligned autonomy, because really you're basically taking, either individual contributors or even big teams, and they becoming part of your organization, right? So if your culture is misaligned, there will always be some sort of a friction, right? There will always be something, and friction sometimes is good. It could lead to sort of a productive transformation. And we had actually cases like that where we did have misaligned culture specifically and on purpose, because the client wanted to transform their culture, right? So we were this like change agent essentially for them. So that is possible, but it needs to be very careful. If that's not your goal, and you're seeing that the two teams are very different in their approach and their cultures and the values, it's probably a recipe for disaster. And the other thing is, it's not a very obvious disaster. It's going to be like one of those things that just it's kind of working, but it's not that great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen that, what you're talking about with the intentionally misaligned cultures before, when a team was going through like a digital transformation where they're going from like a waterfall type development process to a Scrum based, methodology. And they were going through that, trying to become more agile. Maybe when they tried it on their own, they were basically doing waterfall with Scrum instead of really being agile.
Oh yeah, that's
and they bring in a team that's full of people that are used to doing things with an agile methodology and mindset. Yeah, there is that difference of culture, but it causes a little bit of friction in the right ways.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you manage it correctly, it can help start kind of transforming the entire organization towards a more effective model. Because very often it's not even that the people are, in that, let's call it like waterfall model, right? It's not that the people are not the right people. It's just maybe they don't have the experience, and because they've been doing something for so long, they just really need an example and sort of a way to really transform themselves. So this is, I think, where it comes to being, as a manager, as a leader, right? You need to be kind of a gentle but firm and very proactive, right, about it. And so just helping people become better versions of themselves, I think this is a very important aspect of leading like this multicultural organizations like this and leading the cultural transformation.
Yeah, and I think whenever you're making those culture shifts and switching to a different way of doing things, it's really hard for the people that were there before, because they almost have to look back and say, what I've been doing for the last 10 years is not the best. And it's really hard to admit that and use that to change and move forward.
Yeah, that's true. But it's part of growth. I think it's part of growth as like an individual, and because life always changes, everything changes around us, right? So if you're able to really kind of look at it from a more pragmatic perspective and maybe a little bit more optimistic perspective, yes, I haven't been doing the right thing for the last 10 years, but now I can, right? Now I'm going to grow into it. I'm going to become a better version of myself and, going to just essentially grow substantially, right? And look at it as a positive thing versus a negative. And, first reflection is obviously always like negative. People generally don't want to change.
Right.
But if you help them to kind of look at it from different perspective, I found that in majority of cases, people do change. They really welcome that, right? They really welcome the opportunity to grow.
So one of the questions you mentioned, talking about a culture of ownership, that was more like for the, aligned autonomy methodology, but also when you're looking at that as from an individual basis, how do you as a leader instill a culture of ownership for your team? Because I know that's one thing that I've seen individuals struggle with, and even managers and leaders struggle with, is, ownership and giving someone ownership, or people taking ownership of certain things and wanting to kind of distance themselves. How do you as a leader instill that culture of ownership?
That's a tough question. But, I think from my perspective, what you do is you really, first and foremost, you need to really care, right? So really, if you care about an outcome, then, and if you have the right culture, which is not toxic culture, right? So you need to try to, I don't think it's possible to really have culture of ownership if you have some elements of toxicity in culture, right? Mm-hmm. So if you do have that, that needs to be eliminated, but if you have the right culture, right, that supports it, not prohibits it, supports it, and you're sure that you actually truly care about an outcome, you care about the team, right? You care about that specific individual and their growth, right? And so and that is aligned with achieving the goal, right? So the goal that they need to own and achievement of it they need to own is not just for the sake of getting there, right? But it has impact on a company mission, on a company, on their career. And you communicate to them like in which way it's gonna impact their career, like what's in it for them. And not just from like first financial perspective, anything like that, but in general, like what would really be the impact of achieving a particular goal for them, right? Maybe it's, getting to use new technology in a very kind of innovative way. Maybe it's growing into a new role, moving from junior engineer to senior engineer, or this or that, right? So really kind of, and a lot of times, if you've done that already with the team a few times, you don't have to do it. Like they sort of see opportunities themselves. But really, initially, if you're building that, I think, and then lastly, really explaining kind of the why and how to really get there, right? I think often people focus on like the why. That's great, now especially it's more common. But I think the how is still often missing. And so what you end up having is like you have folks who are motivated, they really want to do something, but they don't know how, right? They don't really have that stepping stone. And you ask them to own it and they're not ready for it yet. So they need to be ready. And if they're not, you need to sort of lead them to it, not so do it for them, but show them the way essentially. Like maybe reduce the complexity in multiple ways, reduce the cognitive load in different ways. And if you do all those things, I found that this culture of ownership starts emerging on its own, essentially, right? Well, being kind of proactive and very clear about it too, right? Okay, like I want you to really own this piece, and this is what it means, right? This is what I'd like you to do, and this is why it's important for you. This is why it's important for the company. Like this is all these opportunities, and this is how you get there. Like and really being kind of very open about it, and the transparent in terms of communication. And truly helping that individual, right? Truly helping them to overcome particular issues that they may be encountering or struggling with. And then that kind of creates culture of partnership with them. And they start saying, oh, like you're actually honest and you care. And they start caring too, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's showing that you care about the individual that's actually doing the work. And I like what you talked about with, even if they don't know how to do it, they're not ready for it, you're going to show them how and kind of lead them and guide them along the way. And I think back, I always use a lot of examples of my kids and how that relates to also leading at work, because there's a lot of parallels between parenting and leading at work. But just the other day, I was having one of my sons put away his laundry, and he's like, well, I don't know how to fold these type of clothes. And I'm like, even though I kind of feel like he did, I still had way there, and I said, okay, well, let me show you how to do one. And I did one. I said, okay, now you do one. And he did one. I said, okay, now this is a little bit different. Let me show you how to do the long sleeves. I showed him how to do that. So now you do one, and had him do one. I said, okay, so now I've seen you do pants and shirts. Now do some socks. And I did the socks. Like, okay, now you know how to do pants, shirts, and socks. Why don't you get all those done? And then if there's anything you don't know how to do, put it aside, and we'll teach you how to do those too.
Yeah.
So I didn't just like throw them and say, yeah, you should be able to figure this out. I'm going to show you one example of each, and then make sure you can do one example of each, and then take it on the rest of the way.
Yeah. That's a good example.
You also talked about caring about individuals and understanding that people go through struggle, and it was a little over 2 years ago that Russia invaded Ukraine, and I know you guys have employees in the Ukraine, and how did that affect your business in any way, and what did you have to do as a leader to kind of be supportive and understand that, there are struggles and things that people go through that may affect their work, but you have to be there for them?
Yeah, that's it's a difficult topic to talk about, create a lot of scars. But I think for us, it was, I think really we had the right culture before that whole thing started. And if we wouldn't have that culture, I don't know if we would have survived, right? In general. So, and obviously when some dramatic events like this happens and you're not ready as an organization, like your culture is, maybe have elements of toxicity or in some ways you're not really ready for that, then it's hard to kind of change it overnight, right? So for us, really having the right culture, right people who can take ownership, right, who can take action, and especially in a critical situation like this, that was paramount to sort of surviving through this. So I think what really helped us is having the right leaders, right leaders down the ground, and people who, really dedicated, dedicated to the country, but also dedicated to the work, and really seeing the work as a way to help the country, right? Yeah. A lot of the folks who are still there, who work with us, they donate a lot of money to Ukrainian army, they do a lot of volunteering work. So they really see their job as not just like, oh, I'm going to go and do some work. They really see that as a way of enabling them to really contribute to the victory there. Right. So that was a very important element of it for sure. The other element of, we were a little bit prepared. We were not fully prepared, but we were a little bit prepared. We built business continuity plan before that. And so we were kind of ready, not to what happened at all, but at least it gave us maybe 1 or 2 steps, being ready. And then being like very proactive in managing this specific situation. So we organized lines of communications, we really started kind of looking like what we can do and really focus on what you can do. Because in situations like this, whether that's sort of a war, natural disaster, what have you, right, there is a lot of things that you cannot do or affect, but there's a certain set of things that you can do. And so really focusing on those and really focusing people on those and their energy on those is critical, right? So that helps you to kind of shake everybody out of a shock, essentially, and really start kind of leading people towards some kind of a ability to, continue to live, right? Continue to sustain themselves. So that was very important in the first few days and weeks. And then after that, really, it's the process of adaptation, right? So this is a new reality for us. We had to adapt to it. We had to make sure our offices are fully, they have bomb shelters, they have water supplies, they have food supplies, there is backup power, there's backup connectivity, there's backup to backup, there's backup to backup to backup. So we have to invest a lot of that type of thinking and invest in technology, invest in sort of operational procedures to ensure we have all of that stuff. And so we can sustain and we can support our team on the ground there. And kind of maybe last but not least, probably should have started with that, is really working with every single individual in the way that you can support them, right? Mm-hmm. So really helping them. But here, this may be slightly controversial, but here I also want to sort of make sure that it's clear that by doing that, we also want to stay kind of careful between the individual responsibility, right? So being able to really take care of yourself. Like this is first and foremost, this is part of our culture, right? So it is, in this way, it's very American, right? It's like this very individualistic type, you need to take care of yourself first so that you can take care of everybody else, right?
Right.
So like having a very clear split there and really empowering people to do it. Like that was very important for us too, but also caring, giving them the right tools, giving them, finances, giving people whatever they need and whatever we can provide, so then they can take care of themselves, take care of their families, take care of their communities and the country.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think one of the key things I think you were hitting on there that I wanted to also stress, whenever we fly, we hear the flight attendants always tell us that if there's an event of emergency, you need to put your oxygen mask on first, because you have to take care of yourself before you can help those around you. And I think that was a really good point that you hit on there. I think it's also important to note that, sometimes being able just to keep some sense of normalcy, of having a job, having a project, having something that's going to keep going, gives people a little bit of purpose and a little bit of drive to, and not to escape, but to give them something to look forward to that's a little bit different,
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a big component to mental health there, that's maybe that's, I don't know if that's a correct term, but it's a very broad thing, but yeah, having some sense of normalcy, having some outlet, because in a critical situation like this, you kind of like lost what to do. Like, what am I supposed to do, right? You don't really know. And so really having kind of a way for people to continue with some part of their life as normal, I think it is beneficial.
Absolutely. I think that's really cool, the way that you guys kind of stuck together through that. And, it's a tough situation for sure. But even if you plan for every contingency as a business, whether it be a natural disaster or something like that, when things happen, it's different than the way it planned. It's the way you plan.
Oh,
There's always some things that are different. And I think that's one thing to keep in mind. But yeah, no, I think having that culture in place, it really benefited you guys going through something like this, and it's probably just going to make you guys stronger at the end.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it already made us stronger and more kind of cohesive team. Through like the entirety of the war, we only had a few days of downtime as a company, and that was pretty stark contrast to a lot of other companies. So, I'm incredibly grateful to my team who's there, for everybody who's really helping us to continue operating.
Yeah, and you guys have offices in the U.S. and all over the place, right?
Yeah, so now we have office. Well, we're U.S. based, so we started here
in New York, right?
In New York. Been based there. I lived there for about 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. Initially, company was kind of based there. I had some folks over there, and then we started to sort of like diversify a little bit. We opened office in Ukraine, and a second one. We have 2 locations there. Now we have presence in the U.S. We have presence in Poland. We have presence in Armenia, in kind of other European countries. Wow. So it's a little bit all over the place now, a little bit less kind of concentrated. But it's good. We're kind of expanding geographically to, in Latin America, especially lately. So, helping us to become a more kind of diverse organization. In some way, it sort of forced us to do it because we were thinking about that, expansion quite a while, and that was unfortunate forcing function for us, but in the end.
Yeah. So it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I think we all as leaders can learn a lot about the culture and, just how to, and Motivation 3.0. I think that's a really important topic that we all need to hit on over and over again. Because we as leaders tend to forget some of the things that are important when it comes to autonomy and mastery. But how can people connect with you online and learn more about the things that you're doing and, just stay in touch?
Yeah, I'm mostly online through our website, so we can go check us out at samev.com. We have a blog. I publish some things there, although not recently, but I have a few articles planned. You can also reach out to me by email. It's alex@mev.com, pretty easy. Yeah, stay in touch.
Awesome. And I'll link that in the show notes too at geekleader.com so people can click through to the website and stay in touch that way. Again, Alex, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Really great conversation. Thanks a lot.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to. Click on their links and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. Make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.